Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. I'm really, really happy to be here and to talk about conservation and pérennité of projects. I'm a maker. I've been doing stuff, computer things, for the last 20 years. And when Caspar invited me to this presentation, I started to think about how I would put this presentation into form, and I decided to revisit a bit my practice and how I was able to save almost all my projects over time. These are the threats that I faced over time: technology obsolescence, the agenda of big tech corporation, storage malfunction. One fundamental element is the human factor, like some people that were clients that are leaving a job, and then you don't have an interlocutor to care or help you to save a project. And just the lack of interest, like the people often dies, the project often dies when we just fatigue of it and we just forget about them. I think the fact that I always had a bit three hats. One is an author, the other is a producer, and the other one is, from the beginning of the project, I was also a developer. So the author in me cared tremendously about the project. So since I was really attached to those projects, I always had an obsession to kind of keep them disappearing. The other aspect was the producer in me that was in contact with clients, collaborators, has always been on the forefront to convince everyone that it's worth saving. When the project was on the verge or when a project was broken, I was calling the collaborators and trying to convince them to put the time and also sometimes the money. So here is Unit 9 team in London, Creative, the Google Lab in San Francisco, Maciek in Lodz in Poland, us in Montreal, and just try to put all these people together and put like the couple of hours that will make the difference. And this is just an email, like this was last year, and just a reflector project I did for Arcade Fire was, like it was offline for some updates of the Chrome browser, and it's been a big kind of, we had to put a lot of energy to convince every single collaborators to put the energy and save the project. So at the end, I felt it was important to say how much I was happy. And this is to illustrate a bit like the developer in me and how lucky I was to have that hat and to understand technology. So every time a project was on the verge or that was broken, I was able to kind of get in the code and fix a line or two, or just take the project and migrate it myself from a server to another one. So having these three hats helped me tremendously to save my project. From 2000 to 2005, I had a studio called Bon Golem with Pierre-Mathieu Fortin on the left and Dominique Turmel on the right. Pierre-Mathieu is here today. Hello. And we did around 40 projects for Daniel Langlois, the Centre Canadien d'Architecture, CBC, NFB, many emerging artists at the time, Pierre Lapointe, Ariane Moffat. And after we closed the studio, I just continued to pay for the domain and the hosting. And I did that for 10 years. And at one point I was like what do I do with this? Nobody goes there anymore. So I just kind of took everything that was there and moved it into my new structure as some kind of invisible archive, but just a way to know that it's safe and somehow accessible. And with it, I also saved project by project over that decade, all the projects that we developed together. That was the Toss Looper Suitcases project in collaboration with Peter Greenaway. And it's probably the last remain of that multi-million collaboration between countries. And it's a kind of a sub folder that nobody knows it exists anymore. But it's still, at least it's still there and exists and accessible. The first time I had the idea of just, instead of just saving a project, I would be able to kind of revisit with technology a project, some kind of a redux. Was an interactive music video I did for City and Color and Gordon Downey. And it was kind of revisiting the idea of a Google map where you can zoom in and out over a neighborhood in a suburb. And after a couple of years, for some reason, the band or the label thought it was not relevant anymore. So we had the error of a 404 error. But we made also at the same time a linear version of that video, and it's still online on YouTube. So at that time, I thought it was an interesting opportunity to revisit that project. This was the original version of it. Due to the lack of bandwidth and the limitation of the processor, we had this kind of tiny window where we were zooming in and out. So 4 years later, I had kept every images in the highest resolution possible. I gave those assets to Edouard, and that was the post in 2012, so 4 years later, where I just kind of relaunched the project as a better quality, more refined interaction. And just through the technical capacity of more recent computers, we were able to kind of bring the experience to the place I wanted it originally. So it made me think at that time that the project was not exactly the same. This morning we were talking about that challenge, like, are we putting that into a time capsule, or is it fine to revisit with the same kind of overall vision? And I'm not 100% sure. I think, and regarding this, I kept both. So if you go the AATOAA.com City in Color, and if you go to /original.html, you can see the more fragile, low-res version of it. Over, like, from 2000 to late 2010, I was mainly developing my project with Flash. In the recent time, with Way to Go and Just a Reflector and Chariots of Fire, I've been developing with HTML5, JavaScript, and WebGL. And just in the last 4 years, I saved those projects 6 times. So it's really kind of, I'm in a boat with a hole in it and just scooping water all the time. And it made me think of, just on a pragmatic level, how the promise of the web technology as open standard versus proprietary technology, how as an author dealing with pérennité, there was a kind of a huge difference. Like my Flash project from 2001 are mint, and they haven't moved, I haven't touched them. And the volatility of the web technology creates, in a strange way, an elitist obstacle on preservation. Because at the end of the day, you need to hire a developer to save that project. And a good developer isn't cheap. So I'm not critical about web tech. I love to work with JavaScript and HTML5 and WebGL, don't get me wrong. But on that aspect, we have a lot of work to do, because if Google decide to change something on the browser, like without any notion, like your project is broken, and you have to quickly scoop the water to bring it back. One other thing I do is also regarding the online literacy. So if each time there's some stuff, there's some text about things related to my project, I do print as PDF and centralize that in a big folder. It's really simple and easy, but it's just kind of a practice I started in the mid-2000. And as an exercise, I looked at some old web page, and of course they're not there anymore, probably in the archive.org, but having everything centralized makes it easier for later. This is another example of a dead project. It was my take on a digital artwork. When Arcade Fire released The Suburbs, we were talking a lot about like how we lost the connection with the booklet, and what we had left was a shitty JPEG on our phone. So how do we enrich this experience? And what I did is I used the M4A format that was normally used for audio podcast, where you can change the cover of albums when a radio show goes, and but I microchapter it, so every half second I was changing the image, so a bit like a karaoke. You would see the lyrics kind of synchronized to the song, and we're also able to add good old hyperlinks, so you could link I don't know, like a Neil Young riff that the band semi-copied for a song, and just have this extra layer of content through a musical experience. And again, I think that hack from a Montreal boy of a standard developed by Apple, they were not really pleased with that. So strangely, like over time, the feature and how artwork was displayed on iTunes became less and less accessible, to a point where it's not there. And I predict that in a couple of years we'll have remastered, visually enriched music. The music catalog will be re-available in another proprietary format. So TechCorp agenda is one of the challenge in this. So again, when Caspar came at the studio and we started to discuss, I was like, I'm okay with talking, but I'm more a doer. I'm someone of action. So I thought it would be interesting to try to do something instead of just talking about it. And one project I was never able to save, and it's called Ziggy. It's a project I did in 2003, and probably, I don't know, probably died before that, but it was developed in Lingo, in Director, and at some point it was just inaccessible, and it's probably a project that was the foundation of everything else I've done after that. So I thought it could be a good exercise to try to save this. So the project was born in 1998 in animation class, where instead of doing a short film, animation film, I convinced the teacher to do like a dynamic controlled characters with the keys, with the coded in Lingo. Can you put sound? No, the other sound of the presentation. Please. Oops. So this was a performance we did where Philippe was doing his music thing, and I was reacting to what he was doing live. So it was bit an idea of a digital puppet controlling stop motion animation in real time. And in 2003, I refined this project and it became an installation called Ziggy. This is the original installation that is still in the basement of my mother's place. This is the gear that is somewhere in Longueuil, where you plug the buttons in USB. And I had also like a DVD where I kind of filmed myself. So this is me just before the opening. So I had that trace of me controlling. But the tricky thing is that we don't see my hand controlling it, so it's pretty abstract, right? But still, I had that thing, and like I'm talking about conservation and how we should do that, but this is my archives, like drives, random drives, in boxes, terrible, one copy of everything. And anyway, I had Zig on a DVD like that, and that was the folder. So I had everything, an installer of director, the lossless images, the a DVD, a video capture of me. So it was the kind of the ideal, perfect student archive to kind of do this. So I said, it should be quite easy to revive Zig for this presentation. And I had also like these wooden frame instructions. And for some weird reason, I didn't have that digitally. So the only remaining thing I had of the instruction of how it worked was this piece of paper. So that's what I gave to Edouard, my developer, as a first test, without giving like the hard drive, the DVD, the sets of rules, and he recoded it in WebGL, JavaScript, HTML5. And the first draft, it was really interesting because it was really different. Same features, but still uncanny in the sense that it was like, so it told me like how, like if I had died and like someone have this and they resurrect a project, like you can see the limits of even with the best assets, how it's difficult to achieve something perfectly. So having me over his shoulders, like, oh, this more, okay. So just for my own pleasures and also like symbolically, I would like to do like a short, like 2-minute performance of that because so I've put it online this morning, so it's there, it's alive, back. Zig.AATOAA.com. So I'll do a mini performance. Can I have sound, please? I'll leave the. We can tone down the alphabet. There's like 35, 40 songs exploring a vast spectrum of the human voice. Some Milli Vanilli, some obscure Tuvalu throat song. And I'm really happy to have done that process. After I've done it, I've tried to list what was difference, the slight difference that made it kind of better. So these are all things that kind of change through the process. And then I fixed some stuff, like for instance, my fingers in some stop motion thing. And this is, but at the same time, we try to keep the fragility of a kind of a 2003 me. So trying to make it better, but not too much better. And this is a kind of a, also we talked a lot about that, like how do we, the video capturing, the screen recording, and how me having the DVD and not seeing my hand, I was like, what, you don't understand what I was doing, right? Like I'm moving my finger on the mouse and controlling it, and then controlling the video loop and the actions through the, so I thought maybe there's something interesting into capturing the actual interaction. And also, I think it's similar to some of the solution that I didn't know exist, is to record the clicks, the mouse position, and all these things as just a JSON file that you can then reinterpret in different ways. And again, this idea, the value of having interviews with the author to give that extra layer of context. Zig was the foundation of project that would come after that. So again, I think to know about a lineage, a history, is something really valuable and important. It was Philippe, with who I did my first weird project in the late 90s. He's still a close collaborator. And this idea of digital puppet remained in that practice. It remained also in Just a Reflector, in that kind of really, this idea of controlling, manipulating something. So revisiting Zig a couple of weeks ago, just kind of, I kind of forgot about it, and this conference gave me the excuse to rethink about that and see how this old forgotten project was actually a strong seed or foundation of my whole practice. How do we save our digital heritage? I think most importantly at the moment is a bit like we heard this morning, is just kind of save stuff and copy stuff. And for me, what I learned is that precious DVD with everything in it, I could have done what I've done today 10 or 20 years later, but the important is to keep the assets, because if the drive dies, that's where the real problem and the loss of value is. And again, I'm repeating some stuff I've other people said, but open source is also, could be, like I could have just put that DVD content online and say, hey kids, have fun, save Zig. So thanks so much. Thanks for this conference, for making him alive again. So thank you.